We have 3, 4.
There we go.
Recording in progress.
Oh, we gotta mute this so it's all.
Just give them a chance to load up.
Yes,
Joel, put your hand out.
Where do I?
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special meeting of the City of Gloucester Zoning Board of Appeals. A continued public hearing being held at the Harbor Masters Conference Room, 19 Harbor Loop. This is also a hybrid Zoom meeting, and the Zoom ID number for the record, 891-5601-0600. I recognize in attendance remotely member Peter Canavo and James Gelati. In person, myself, Chairman Joe Parisi, Vice Chair Catherine Schlichty, Clerk Michael Nyman, alternates Robert Russell and Glenn Gyllenhaal, sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. So I declare we have a quorum. And as I said, this is a hybrid meeting. There are people on Zoom that will be able to participate. And if you wish to participate and speak at any time, if you're on a phone, you dial *9. If you're on your device, you hit the raise hand button. So to begin, this is a special meeting regarding the application of William Wheat seeking a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, to construct a 30-unit apartment building of rental housing, of which 8 units, 25% of it will be affordable at 50 rear Maplewood Avenue. The petitioner is seeking waivers from dimensional requirements and use allowances of the extensive business district as defined in the Gloucester zoning ordinance, along with waivers from the rules and regulations of other regulatory boards and commissions of the city of Gloucester. How we're going to attack tonight is we wanted to hear, we're going to have a walkthrough of the site design, the revised plans, but before that, we have on Zoom with us one of our consultants, Scott Turner from Environmental Partners, and we can bring him in to give us a quick update on where he's at and plans going forward. We'll deal with the whole drainage issue at a future meeting, but I just wanted to give him an opportunity to let us know what's happening. Scott, you could unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I need name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Scott Turner. I am Director of Planning at Environmental Partners in Quincy, Massachusetts. My home address is 24 Bancroft Road in Stoughton.
Thank you.
So I received plans probably around Thanksgiving or so. We issued a review letter in December. Received plans, I guess, in January with a response letter from the applicant, revised plans and a revised stormwater report. How do you want to proceed? Do you want to go item by item through the letter, or do you just want me to give you
No, I just wanted to get an update. You could discuss where you were. We've read your first report. I want to be able to publicly tell people what your plans are tomorrow and going forward, and a timeline maybe.
Okay. So my letter was, covered a lot of different areas, but the area that I guess needs the most attention, and this was discussed at a call we had last week with the applicant, his engineer and attorneys, was really the stormwater management. And I guess the biggest, I don't want to say difference of opinion, but the thing that we need to address, and we're going to address tomorrow, is to do additional test holes. The applicant has agreed to do test holes to check the soils. The reason I've questioned them is because the site design is really driven by the use of porous pavement, and the effectiveness of porous pavement really depends on 2 things. One is the nature of the soils that the porous pavement will drain into, and also seasonal high groundwater. So I have some questions about that based on adjoining wetlands or adjacent wetlands. And so tomorrow we're going to go out and look at, dig some test holes, understand what the soil conditions are better, give me an opportunity to look at it and also evaluate seasonal high groundwater. I think from there, depending on those holes, or the results of those test holes, we'll have a better understanding as to the nature and I guess the extent of any revisions that may be necessary. We may go out there and we may find that conditions are exactly as they explained in their application, or we may find that they're different and you may have to adjust the design. So that's really what drives most of my comments. I do have some other comments regarding drainage, regarding pipe sizing, and again, depending on what we find tomorrow, that may change as well. I am in receipt of a letter that was provided by a representative of the adjacent property regarding the pump system, and I made note of that issue in my review letter as well. Currently, there is a catch basin and pump system that services the site's property and the adjacent property. And with the site design, the applicants are proposing a retaining wall, which would effectively cut off, it would reduce the amount of water that flows into that catch basin that's on the adjacent property and the pump system, but it also ends up, containing any flooding onto the adjacent property as well. And the method by which that water is, and probably one day was evacuated from the site is through a pump system that I understand doesn't work. So, that's something I noted in my letter, and I know that the abutter has expressed concerns about that issue as well. So that's something we'll take a look at tomorrow also.
Okay, and I just want to, for the record, let everybody know that tomorrow's endeavor is between our consultant environmental partners and the applicant. This is not a public site visit. It's not a public hearing. Anyone's ability or right to go on their property would be subject to the property owner. You can't trespass there. We don't have the right, none of us do, to go on their property. This is something between the engineers and not the board. You agree?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Scott, thank you. I know we have read through your full analysis, and there's you commented on a lot of things, zoning and whatnot, which we'll be dealing with later, but the big focus down the road and the timeline, I guess, depending on what you find and how your report comes back and whether Hancock Associates need to do any adjusting, will kind of dictate when we hold another meeting to just focus on stormwater. So hopefully that won't take too long. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll turn it over to Attorney Favaza, who at Hancock Associates. What we'd like to do is walk through the revised site plan. We've had a hard time, be able to look at it and be explained to everyone the changes that have been made and everything we're talking about. Are you saying it's plan 4, page 4?
The update.
We kind of messed it up.
Yeah. No, I guess I said sheet 4 as like an example. I think I'll put it on the screen and kind of follow
Yeah, you can
along.
put it up and then we can figure out.
To the cursor. Just enabling me. For the record, my name is Joel Favaza. I'm an attorney at Seaside Legal Solutions, 123 Main Street in Gloucester. Here on behalf of William Wheat, the initial applicant, and also Bigelow Real Estate LLC. By way of quick update, while I wait for the screen share to activate, per comments that we had received from City Legal and outside legal counsel, we have conveyed title to the property from William Wheat individually into Bigelow Real Estate LLC. That is the entity that was named as the eligible entity from the Mass Housing Eligibility Letter. We've gone ahead and take care of that. I've also put
For
together.
everybody, sorry, we got that and forwarded it just a little while ago, the quick claim deed. for the transfer of the property.
And so it's our hope that we will be providing, I provided a draft supplemental or a revised application, which is what we will be presenting from tonight. Barring any major changes based on tonight's discussion, we'll be filing this formally with the city either tomorrow or Monday. Again, per comments from city legal, we basically redone the application in the name of Bigelow, and it's also given us the chance. The original application has an either or waiver request. Kind of said, well, if Whistle Stop is frontage, then we need this waiver, and if Whistle Stop isn't frontage, then we need that waiver. And now we've also, through conversation with them, determined that Whistle Stop is a private right of way, but not recognized as a proper roadway. The frontage is essentially zero along this right of way as far as it being a city road. So that actually reduced our waiver count. As you can see here, we need a big waiver on frontage for 0 feet of frontage, but it eliminated all the need for waivers relating to a front yard, vegetative cover in the front yard setback. Because there is no front yard, those requirements no longer apply. All we have is side and rear. So that's our updated waiver request. And I believe your outside counsel is going to speak to you about that a little bit. Hopefully her notes and my notes are close. And I'll start going through the plan set, and obviously introduce yourself to the board.
Hello, my name's Robert DiBenedetto. I'm a civil engineer with Hancock Associates. Our company address is 315 Elm Street in Marlboro.
Okay. So if you want to start with the existing conditions, you let me know where you want to go.
Well, I believe everybody here is familiar with the existing conditions at this time. You've seen it from the previous meeting. So we have an open vacant lot with some previous development, some gravel and pavement that's been there for years, and old railroad tracks. Looking for a new developer. Layout materials plan. We have
Do you want like a laser or something to point with?
up on the screen.
I can give you like some to draw with. If you'd like to draw, you can.
See the big drawings behind you that we can read.
Okay, maybe I can just point up there. Then
All we've had so far is an email plan. So we're looking at this big on my thing. It's a new revised plan, and we want you to tell us what's changed
Sure,
and explain the whole project like we just looked at it for the first time.
sure, no problem.
Give me a zoom in, let me know.
All right, thank you. So you may have noticed from a previous plan set, we had 2 entrances off of Whistle Stop Way to provide access for the Bigelow Real Estate car wash. This has now been reduced to 1 entrance at 24 feet wide, and we'll have 1 entrance for there, which will be a full 24 feet going all the way down and back to allow for access in and out, and allow for the car wash to take their cars in and to allow them to leave off of Maplewood. That was one of the major changes from the last plan set that was provided there. So
I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, no
What's
problem.
that?
I'm sorry. There we go. I'm gonna try and be skillful about this, but forgive me if I skip around. I'm on a touch screen.
I thought you said you couldn't use Whistle Stop.
Excuse me,
Well, we cannot use it for frontage, but for access, there is existing access along Whistle Stop Way for the development to the rear, and for a parking lot back there, we would use that for access as well.
I just want to remind everybody, this is not an open forum. So if you have questions, there'll be opportunity to speak. But we want to hear the presentation.
So my apologies, sorry.
And just to clarify that point, it's going up again, you'll see there's 88, the property is 88 feet wide on this, on the side of Whistle Stop. However, the rights to the first 53 feet of that into Whistle Stop, the way itself, are well established. That remaining 35 feet is subject to question. And so rather than going through and trying to resolve that on a title issue, we've instead redesigned to just use what is guaranteed and proven rights into Whistle Stop.
And that's what this line here in this dimension represents. So we're showing that 50 feet from this point here is where our driveway is going to connect with Whistle Stop. And then this would just remain a landscaping on that side. So we're proposing a 2-story, 30-unit multifamily residential building. It would be front facing to the west. And we're going to have access along the front here on a raised wood platform to go into each of the lower units. And we'll have 2 sets of stairs to go to the second floor. There will be a balcony per se to access the second floor units as well. We're going to have parking all along the front of the residential building, 2 handicap stalls on the corner. There will be ADA access from the stalls themselves to go into the first units on the right. This will specifically have a ramp as opposed to stairs to get to the door, and these will be handicap accessible units. There will also be ADA access going all the way along Whistle Stop out to Maplewood. And then there will also be a connection towards the back, and I'll move front here, connection going all the way towards the back, towards the MBTA. Thank you. That'll be access along the front and then going towards the back. We are proposing some minor work in the parking lot. However, that is going to be subject to an agreement with the MBTA, which we will have discussions with them in the future. If nothing else, we'll at least have a sidewalk going to the corner of the property to allow for potential connection later. We will have a turnaround on the rear side. This will be specifically for our fire department. We had a swept path analysis performed, and we can show that the fire truck can make it around the turnaround and get out. And additionally, we're adding 4 parking stalls in the back for overflow parking for other ancillary needs. We're also going to have a dumpster pad in the back, so it'll be used for keep it off away from the residents. We'll have a bicycle rack on the front, and we'll have multiple areas for snow storage throughout the site. Snow storage will be on site, nothing will be shipped off.
Those areas include the landscaped area off of Whistle Stop, the center of the traffic turnaround, and this kind of
Sliver.
this corner, the triangle space above the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Excuse me, for the record, I want to recognize Peter Canavo has now joined us in person, no longer on the Zoom, member of the board.
No, yeah, I'll talk a little
You
about this.
you keep referencing the back. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Front of the building?
front, rear, I'm calling Whistle Stop the front of the development, and the rear would be like back over here, but you're
Along the
right.
train
From,
track.
yeah, but from the building perspective, yeah, it would be to the left on your sheet. There will be some additional improvements around the car wash as well. First will be some redefining of some of the parking stalls along the left side of the building. Some curb cuts put in, or not curb cuts rather, but actual curbing put in to show the flow path for vehicles to get into the car wash or to travel around. We'll also be installing a 4-foot wide sidewalk to allow access to Maplewood Ave. I believe that's it for this site. Next sheet will be the drainage and utilities.
So we haven't received the fire department report, right? What do we got?
No.
Okay.
I think it's that's the sort of we talked about real quick.
Yes, this was the analysis we showed that a fire truck can get in and out. And of course, the access will be from Whistle Stop.
This is based on the city of Gloucester's largest apparatus. So the pumper trucks will have an even easier time. This is if chief wants to dispatch the ladder truck to an active fire. That ladder truck can nose first in and nose first back out onto Whistle Stop.
And because this, we're satisfied that any trash pickup is going to be easy to maintain to get access back there and turn around and get out.
Right, Amazon trucks, FedEx trucks
Yeah.
should all have an easier time than the city's ladder truck, which, as you know, from permitting other projects, is pretty cumbersome to navigate. So if that guy fits in and out, then the rest of the trucks you would see at a residential development should have an easy time coming in and coming out.
And there's also a waiver for, I don't know what we're calling it, side yard setback behind the buildings,
Yeah,
because the fire department hasn't given you any indication of it.
we haven't heard. This is consistent with other projects that have been permitted recently. When you're not able to provide the 360 access, as long as you're able to provide adequate access that the ladder can get to the 3 sides of the building and otherwise up on top of the building, that sort of thing. This is the utility.
Thank you.
What would you like?
Let's talk about the non-drainage utilities first. So our access for water, gas, and sanitary sewer is all going to be coming up through the car wash property from Maplewood Ave, making connections out here and adding new structures in Maplewood as needed. There will be a 20-foot utility easement on this property to allow for future maintenance and access for the utility specifically. All of these are going to make a direct connection into the building, as shown. Well, additionally, we're also going to have 2 fire hydrants on site, one on either side of the building, and that'll be connected with a water line. So all of their utility needs will be met with these structures.
Can you just point to where they are on the plan?
Oh, sure. So fire hydrant right here to the right of the handicap stall, and then over on the left side here.
To the left of the last parking spot.
Yes. So for our drainage, now mind you, I'll keep it simple for now, and everything will be contingent on the soil testing for tomorrow. But our intent is to have 2 sets of porous pavement cells that will be located under the parking stalls specifically. And this will allow for the water in front of these areas to drain down to this and to infiltrate in that location. The intent is to capture as much as possible to retain there, specifically the first flush. And then any overflow will reach nearby area drain, and that will connect into the municipal stormwater system for Gloucester. That overflow will head off into the existing structure in Whistle Stop Way. There is I believe a 36-inch line that is in Whistle Stop that drains down towards to the east or to the top of the sheet, and we'll make a connection there. All other grading is going to be directing all the stormwater to this area, specifically around the gravel in the back will all be directed towards the nearest cell. There will only be a couple small spots where water will be flowing onto Whistle Stop or into the car wash. As part of our analysis, we analyzed the pre to post to see how much water is currently leaving towards Whistle Stop or towards the car wash and how much is leaving after our development. So we've shown that we've either matched or reduced in those situations. See, anything that's landing on the rooftops, I believe is going to be draining towards the front. And although it's not shown here at the moment, we will have some kind of structures to either have downspouts that go into the cells themselves, or it could be some kind of surface and drain to the top and go over. We'll discover what would be make the most sense as we move forward with the drainage. I believe that's it for the drainage and utilities. It's the next sheet. That's landscaping.
Yeah.
All right. So working with a landscape architect, we're proposing a series of shrubbery and trees throughout the site. Make it as green as possible, certainly a lot greener than it is now.
One of the advantages to the revision from the 2 entrances to the 1 entrance is that along what's shown at the top corner, as you look at the sheet, that's a lot more uninterrupted green space at the entrance to the development. So it gives you room to plant bigger trees, a wider variety, and just have some nice grass area that otherwise was more chopped up in the previous designs. It's been a kind of a bonus from the redesign.
Sheet is going to be. I was talking about demolition. This is pretty standard, just preparing for the project. The portions that are going to be removed, various pavements that have been buried will be dug up. I believe there's some railroad spurs that are also in there that will be removed. And then we'll prepare the site with erosion control, silt fencing around the site, around the project itself. Construction entrance are all pretty standard during construction. And then we have various details beyond that. And there's the swept path analysis that we talked about before.
And so this is the floor plan for the proposed 2-level building. This has not been altered since our initial presentation a few weeks back at this point. And these renderings, again, have not really changed since our original application. Again, the building has not been modified to date. And that's speaking to what I spoke about earlier. There's a deed on record. We've pushed it into Bigelow, but I think that's it for the civil set. We'd like to have our traffic engineer go through the site circulation in a little more detail. We can do that now.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
before you go to that, I think Scott Turner, there might be a couple of things.
Is he still on?
Yes, he's still on.
Oh, sure. Can we fill this screen share?
That might, I know there were a couple of things in his letter, such as lighting, et cetera, that might be helpful for the board to hear, if or whatever Scott feels like might be helpful.
So, yeah, one of the things that we did discuss, we discussed everything in my letter, including lighting. So we typically what I prepare when I'm designing projects and see when I'm reviewing projects as a photometrics plan that shows, light intensities on the site. The reason for that is to show that the site is lighted appropriately, is safe, but also to understand, if there's any light glare or any light that's spilling over into adjacent properties. So we talked about that, and we emailed a little bit yesterday back and forth about their approach. Basically what I said is that I'm looking for a photometrics plan that shows adequate light throughout the site, and but also no glare off the properties. And so they indicated that they would prepare one. So I think their intent is to have the lights come from the buildings. I don't think they're, at this point, from what I saw, they were intending to have any light poles on the site. But the photometrics really tell the story. So once we get those, we'll have a better idea as to whether it's appropriate or not. The other thing we discussed a little bit at length was the retaining wall and making sure that there's an adequate and safe barrier on the top of the retaining wall to prevent cars from, going off the wall or hitting it. The wall is only 3 or 4 feet high, and it changes over time, but that was another item that came up. So I think that's really about it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, those points were in your report. I guess it's good there. We can go on to the traffic. Is that what you want to hit?
Yeah, so just.
And is Jeff's here?
Yes.
He's on. Attorney Pavazza, you have people.
Sure, I'll put the plan back up for everybody. If you could please introduce yourself for the record.
Ken Graham from Basin Engineering. I prepared the traffic impact assessment that has been submitted and that Mr. Dirk, my dear friend, has reviewed. There's only so few traffic engineers in the Commonwealth. So, it's a very simple project, one way in, one way out. We went out, we actually, we did some inventories. We got just the conditions on Maplewood. We got some traffic volumes on Maplewood to find out how much traffic was out there. And in terms of numbers, we did our counts. When did we do our counts? November 2022. We seasonally adjusted them because November volumes were slightly lower than average based on available Mass DOT data. We did not have to perform a COVID adjustment. Mass DOT issued, well, I don't know if they've issued the directive yet, but they issued a statement that as of March of 2022, traffic volumes no longer have to be adjusted for COVID variation unless you're in an area of high office content. Because as you can see simply by this meeting, we're hybrid, people are at home watching this and they're not driving as much, particularly to work. Even Mass DOT is on a hybrid work schedule to this day. So, yeah, Maplewood Avenue carries about 8,400 cars a day, and Whistle Stop Way, just west of Maplewood, carries about 1,000 cars a day. As part of our effort to check sight lines and make sure everything was safe at our access, when we did the counts on Whistle Stop Way, we collected speed data, and the 85th percentile speed was found to be about 24 to 25 miles per hour, depending on direction. So they're not flying down Whistle Stop Way. We did a crash assessment. We used Mass DOT's impact website. We went back, I go back as far as 2017 to get at least 3 full years before COVID, because 2020 and 2021 and part of 2022 are really the COVID years, and traffic volumes are down, but they're starting to come back, but I don't think they're going to come back 100% for a couple of years still. We did our traffic generation this week. Mr. Dirk and I had gone through this initially using the ITE Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual. We're looking at 32 to 33 trips. That's one car either in or out over the course of the morning peak hour or the evening peak hour. And of course, that's straight ITE. That's without any adjustment for transit. Based on some research, and I forget the website, but it summarizes all the driving characteristics. And 75% of current Gloucester residents drive to or from work, and the remaining approximately 25% either carpool, work at home, walk, bicycle, or use public transportation. And in this case here, public transportation was 4.5%. But we didn't apply any reductions as a result of this project being immediately adjacent to the MBTA station. But we expect people will be using the MBTA to get to and from work. So as part of our assessment, when we used to take the full 32 and 33 trips during the morning and evening peak hour, add that most of that's going to go out to Maplewood Avenue. And so that increase represents about a 2% increase on Maplewood Avenue, which is typically daily volumes. They fluctuate plus or minus 5%. So that 2%, would not even be noticeable. So I told you earlier that we had done some site distance measurements. We looked at Whistle Stop Way with a proposed site driveway. And at the time when this was written, there was going to be a new entrance for the car wash. So these numbers are going to be close, but they're not going to be exactly the same because the site plan has changed slightly, and there is no new car wash driveway anymore. It's shared with us. And we looked at Whistle Stop Way and Maplewood Avenue, and they all have, based on the speeds we recorded, good sight lines and meet AASHTO minimums. We also did a little parking analysis because this is a smaller project. We use the ITE parking generation manual, the 5th edition, and that indicates, depending on how you assess the data, and there will be some discussion about this, 33 spaces with the transit stop next door will be adequate. So we've recommended basically, the driveway be 1 lane in, 1 lane out, under stop sign control. All pavement markings and signage conform to the manual on uniform traffic control devices. Any landscaping that's installed at the driveway be low, and so it doesn't impede sight lines. As a matter of fact, the existing car wash sign is going to be moved slightly because that is in the line of sight. And then we have a little transportation demand management where we'll try to get people to carpool and so forth, or use public transportation. Give them a welcome packet that tells them, here's the public transportation services that are in the area that you can use. And of course, as Rob mentioned, the sidewalk that will be out to Maplewood and the sidewalk that will go, at least right now, to the MBTA property. Hopefully they'll be able to work with us and we can have a full sidewalk into their property. So that's a summary of where I stand right now. And I just received this morning, Mr. Dirk's letter, which I'm sure he will summarize and we can have some discussion on.
Thank you. Yeah, at this time, I guess we'll stay on traffic and so our board knows Jeffrey Dirk is our consultant on traffic. He can tell you what his company is. And I know reading his report, there's a few areas of concern.
Yes, and, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So for the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm a managing partner with Vanessa and Associates, and as you heard, we're the city's transportation consultant on the project. So we've issued 2 letters for the board's consideration, and sort of what you heard from Scott, he and I kind of tag team as they relate to the site plan. So I'm going to have some comments as they relate to the site plan. The comments on the site plan, as I'm looking at it from a transportation perspective, is really looking at access, circulation, and parking. Those are kind of the things that are applied fairly. So you'll see some of this overlapping with some of the comments that you heard from Scott this evening. We also have comments on the assessment that Mr. Cram had presented. So the initial set of comments we provided were based on the original site plans, which have since been revised and presented to you. The intent of those comments was to offer the designer kind of our first pass on things that we would like to see on the site plans to improve access, to improve circulation. And a lot of what you heard tonight addresses those. So as you see the bike racks that have been put in fact, the consolidation of the access, although relating to Whistle Stop Way and where access can be attained from a functional perspective and circulation, the 2 access points as they had originally designed, it really didn't work from a traffic flow perspective as well. So, we're glad to see that it's kind of moved in this direction here. We also had some comments on the sidelines, which Mr. Cram had gone through in the initial plan. So now as I kind of bring forward to our current letter, which is February 10th, which I acknowledge the applicant just received it, there's no significant issues as it relates to the transportation study. So I'll start with that first, because that's kind of the last thing that you heard. This is a low volume project. It's going to generate, as you heard about, if we take into consideration some use of public transportation, which we think is realistic, that people are going to find a way to get there. You are really talking about 30 peak hour trips. So it's 1 additional vehicle every 2 minutes during those peak hours that Mr. Cram had mentioned. So as we think about that added traffic volume on these roadways, which today are low volume roadways, it's not going to result in impact. And when we're talking about impacts, it's we're measuring delays. So how long you wait at a stop sign. And then we're looking at also the queuing that happens. So mostly what we experience is how long do I wait to actually get onto the road? And then ultimately, how many cars are in front of me? If there's 2 cars there today, how many cars will be there after this project is built? So the project is, as I said, 1 additional vehicle every 2 minutes during the peak hour is not going to cause a significant impact in terms of increasing those measures. That being said, one of the comments that we had asked Mr. Cram to go back and look at is we do want to understand as it relates to Whistle Stop Way and Maplewood is delays in vehicle queuing today at that intersection before and after the project. So a traditional analysis that will be presented with the existing conditions. So how do we have delays in vehicle queuing today? So as you go out there, that's what you would see. Then there are also typically you look at a 7-year planning horizon. So that's what the state sets for us. 7 years in the future allows for this board or other town boards to issue whatever approvals are necessary for the applicant then to construct the project, and then for residents that live here and put the traffic out onto the roadway. So looking 7 years out allows you to see what the future may look like with the project. So we've asked the applicant to undertake that analysis as it relates to Whistle Stop and Maplewood. So you have an understanding of what is the impact going to be at that intersection. Because as Mr. Cram said, that 30 cars, let's say if they get down to the end of the street, half of them go left, half go right. So those numbers get smaller and smaller as you get away from the Whistle Stop Way intersection. So the most concentrated impact will be right there. So if we can understand how that intersection works, you can kind of extrapolate that to say that's the worst case. And then as you get away, the impacts will be less and less as you get further from the project site. So one of our comments was to have them undertake that analysis as it relates to the intersection. We've also recommended that the improvements in the mitigation package, and that's something we can kind of refine with the board as the hearing process goes along. They have a set of recommendations which we agree with. We think they're good recommendations as they relate to the project, but they need to be conditions of the approval of the project, because some of these are not just what you see on the site plan. They're going to follow on and have life to them after, to the extent the board approves the project. So we need to make sure those are in your conditions. So that you can always, they're enforceable. The building or zoning enforcement officer has those conditions, can enforce them. So with respect to the transportation analysis, that's really all we have for comments as they relate to the analysis as it relates to impacts. We have a second set of comments that deal with the site plan, and those comments I think are more substantive as they relate to access, circulation, and parking. And I'll start with parking first. As Mr. Cram had mentioned as part of his analysis, he did do a review of parking demands based on comparable types of developments. So the Institute of Transportation Engineers that he had mentioned, they publish studies of data that's been collected at similar communities. They do it for trip generation purposes. So they have information for multifamily developments such as this. So if we know how many units are proposed, they have several hundred studies that we can look at and estimate how much traffic will be produced. They do the same thing for parking. So they publish information for multifamily developments that you can estimate how much, what the peak parking demand is going to be on a day of any day of the week, including on the weekend. So they've undertaken that level of analysis for the project. What that analysis says is actually pretty consistent with what your zoning bylaw is, and what I've recommended in my letter to you is that what we find for multifamily is you typically want to have a parking ratio of 1.5 spaces per unit outside of downtown Boston, sitting right on top of a transit station. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is that we need to accommodate guests. I think the most important thing as we look at the suburb area, sort of where we are, although there's a commuter rail station right next door, that doesn't mean that I can't own a car, or that I don't need to own a car and live here. I may choose to leave my car there, use the commuter rail to go to work, but I need a car to get my groceries. I need my car to do other things such as that. That's unlike if I'm in downtown Boston, where I'm walking to the corner store to get the groceries or something like that. That's not the same situation you have here. So it's great in terms of reducing the peak hour traffic volumes that Mr. Cram had mentioned, so we can get those 33 vehicles down to something less than that. But as it relates to parking, I still need my car. So from a parking standpoint, what we're suggesting, and I think the data bears this out, is that 1.5 is a typical area where we're comfortable. We've done surveys of parking demands for multifamily projects elsewhere, even where there is access to public transportation in the suburbs. And what we find is that peak demand is still, it might get just a little bit below 1.5, maybe it's 1.42 or something like that. 1.5 is really the sweet spot. So, we're comfortable with recommending that. I think that's consistent with what your zoning bylaw says. And so we're suggesting that that's something that for this site would be appropriate, just given the environment that it's.
Question on that. Is there no discount for the fact that the majority of the units are studio?
You can look at it on a per bedroom basis, but I think that typically when we see a mix of units like this, you might have, if it's a studio, the 1.5 still gives you that blended ratio where some people might have one car for the studio, but then you might have other ones with two cars in it. So it is a consideration, and maybe there's market demographics that the applicant can point to. But I think absent them providing additional data, what we're suggesting is 1.5 until such time as they provide information that would suggest that you don't need 1.5, because we have not seen studies in a similar market area that would say that anything less than 1.5 is something that's going to work.
I mean, to me, it's almost like a motel. You wouldn't have 1.5 spaces for every room in a motel.
You're not, it's a blended ratio. And it does account for the fact that some units will have one, some are going to have two.
There might be a couple and then.
But the other thing to think about is visitors and guests, and the fact that there's no on-street parking here. So when you start to think about reducing the parking demand, it's really then looking at, if we don't have enough parking, where does that parking occur? Is it safe to walk there? Things like that. So it's not to say that the board can't become comfortable with the waiver that they've suggested, because it's a small number of spaces. But I think what the applicant then needs to come back with is, if we were to provide 1.5, and I think this is really the question, if the zoning says 1.5 and they're asking for a waiver from it, can they achieve 1.5? If they can't achieve 1.5 on the site, then where does that extra, where do the 8 spaces, where do they park? Because if the zoning says that that's what the city is comfortable with saying that you need for residents plus guest parking, if they needed 1.5, then where does that overflow happen if it were to occur? And I think if they're able to present that, then that's something that maybe we could all get comfortable with and say, okay, well, there's a sidewalk that gets you down to Maplewood. If they can find on-street parking, there's a way for them to walk up to the project site. So I think that's kind of the homework that the applicant needs to undertake as it relates to the waiver request that's been asked.
Thank you.
Focusing then back onto the site and the circulation. The next thing that we had some comments on is in fact the emergency vehicle turning analysis. So there's a couple of things that relates to that. The applicant is correct that what they've shown is the ladder truck can travel up Whistle Stop Way, turn, get into the site, circulate, and then come back out. As it relates to Whistle Stop Way, and I know the board probably has had a lot of discussion about that. Our comments as it relates to the emergency access is about the condition and actually the structural condition of the pavement on Whistle Stop Way. The emergency vehicle is, it's a heavy apparatus that needs to get in there. So what we want to make sure of as you look at the swept path when the truck comes in, and if you focus on the entering movement, what you see is the truck, it has to swing wide. So it's basically right up against the edge of the pavement, and then it comes in. When we're looking at structural pavement section, the weakest point is the edges. And if you have weight on the edges and you don't have anything on the side to support it, the pavement flushes off. It starts to push off to the edge. You start to lose subbase and everything on that if it's not adequately retained. We know that there's wetland, and I don't know if it's tidal wetland or whatever it happens to be there, but we know that vegetation comes right up to the edge. So what we've asked the applicant to undertake is to answer that question is, what is the structural condition of the pavement? Can it support the travel emergency vehicle? And I think it's not just supporting it, it's can it support it to make the maneuvers that are shown out here, so that swing wide and then to come back in. So we've asked them to, have us be able to understand that. We've also had some difficulty, and I don't know if the board has had the same difficulty of understanding where the edge of pavement is. Typically, we have a very good defined line that says this is the edge of the travel lane. It seems like it might, and I apologize if I'm not reading the plans correctly, but it seems like it's not defined very well. And what I'm seeing is kind of an edge with a squiggly line, and you might have to take a magnifying glass to it. But I think what they're saying is it's variable width. So there's a couple of things that relates to Whistle Stop Way that I think that they've demonstrated the fire truck can get in, but the question is really, can the pavement support that vehicle coming in there and the repeated loadings that may happen as it relates to it. The other thing is I'm looking at, and again, it would go to the fire department, is the turnaround area that's going to be gravel. How comfortable they are with that. It's got to be maintained, and maybe it's just something that the applicant provides some more information on the structural condition of the gravel surface that will be there. And again, it goes back to the heavy apparatus needing to go and make the turns. And of course, they're turning their wheels. So if you've got the gravel, it really needs to be compacted well and everything. And I'm sure Scott's going to look at that. But that's something in your fire chief just should comment as to how comfortable they are with the truck being able to maneuver there and going through. So I think from the standpoint of the on-site, their physical site plan, those are some of the things we've asked them to go back and look at. The other issue is the adjacent site, which I know the car wash, I don't think is a part of this application, but clearly they're showing modifications to the car wash. And I have not reviewed what's happening internal to the car wash. That's something that probably needs to be done. My concern, of course, always when we look at this is that we've got now two sites that are dependent upon each other. I think it's more so the car wash is dependent upon this site plan. So, that I think that's something for others to consider. However, I'm looking at the two sites and saying they're interrelated now, because you have access going through the residential site into the car wash. So if I haven't reviewed the internals of the car wash, but what you've heard tonight is the sidewalk goes through the car wash. So if we're considering pedestrian connections down to Maplewood, it's dependent upon the modification of the car wash. As it relates to the site itself, the driveway connection to the car wash, if you look at where it is, it lines directly up with the wash bay. So I believe that that's the entrance into the tunnel of the car wash, if I'm reading the plans correctly. So our comment as it relates to that is that has the potential to impact circulation within the project site. And if we just think about, absent what we've had out there today and what we're going to have tomorrow, snowy December, the sunny day after that's happened and they've salted the roads and the car wash is busy. The car washes, cars are stacking to try to get through there. They're going to stack into the site just because that driveway lines right up with the tunnel bay. So we've asked the applicant to provide some information on how are they going to manage that, because that is the way to get into the car wash. If there's a backup during those type of conditions, it's going to affect the circulation of the site. And then it goes to the turning analysis. You see, if we've got queuing into the site and the fire truck tries to get in there, now we've got the relationship between the two sites. So then if the car wash doesn't work in terms of circulation, you can't get the cars out of the car wash. They have no place to go as the fire truck tries to get in there. So how do we flush that out? That's dependent upon what happens in the car wash site. And again, it's not a part of the application, so we haven't reviewed it, but there's now a relationship between the two that really needs to be considered. So, whether it's a part of this application or it's not a part of the application, they affect each other. So that, as I said, well, the comments on the traffic study, Mr. Krim did a good job of providing the information that's necessary to understand what the impacts of the project are. We have just a few comments that I think are easily addressed. The site plan does have some things that need to be rethought, in our opinion. So that's kind of the major areas that we think they need to start to look at. And then I think it's really to council and to the board is the car wash. And how do we deal with that? Is it a part of the review of this project? Because I think both Scott and myself would need to drill down more and provide some comments on the car wash. But I think what you've heard from my presentation tonight is they are interrelated and they need to work together if this is the access configuration.
So with regard to the initial 50 rear, is point 2 and 7 still open in your mind? You see we've closed the number of the discussions satisfactory, but I still see 2 and 7 as open issue.
Yes, 2 is still open and that deals with the vehicle turning analysis, and 7 is the parking.
Right, okay. And then potentially recommending, that'll be something we're going to listen here from our council on in a bit, about whether we need to consider both parcels as part of one project. Because it obviously we have to drive over one to get to the other, and then I never even thought about how the car wash backs up in good weather. But I
noticed it
considered
out
that.
on
Railroad
Ave
yeah.
the other day. There was about 10 cars back there.
So interesting. Appreciate your feedback so far. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
would it be possible for us just to kind of touch upon a little bit what was just discussed?
Sure.
Sure. So I appreciate that. So I think agreeing with what Mr. Dirk just said, the majority of the comments are just a matter of kind of sharpening some pencils and dialing it in. The one piece that I'm going to respectfully push back on is the number of parking. To be quite frank, we think this is overkill that we're offering as it is. Mr. Wheat owns 50. There are 4 apartments there. Of those 4 apartments, 1 car. We do not expect in reality that the tenants of this property are going to be having all 1 or 1+ cars per unit. In fact, we think one of the appeals of this unit is that it is going to be walkable to downtown, walkable to Shaw's, walkable to the train station, walkable to any number of retail and commercial jobs that are in the downtown area. And so given their modest size and the modest rent being charged, we do not think that you will even see the 1-to-1 ratio of cars to apartments in this complex. Another conversation we actually had at the planning board stage when they were providing their review, and one of the comments that a couple of the planning board members kept coming up with was, if you eliminated some of these parking spaces, you could add some green space. We really don't think there's going to be that many cars. With all due respect to what the national and international studies show and the typical rules of thumb that you get these kind of base guidelines on, I think it's important to remember one of the reasons that this does eventually come down to local control is that, you as the local zoning board understand Gloucester as residents and members of this board, and the idea that there's going to be 45 cars attributable to these 30 units, I don't think is realistic. I think in fact, you'll find there's going to be less than the 1-to-1 ratio. No one has a crystal ball. Obviously, we do not want to create traffic and parking problems. We've again gone more than what we think is actually going to be necessary. And again, that also helps provide capacity for guests and visitors, et cetera. But we respectfully kind of push back on this idea that we need to find more parking on site. If anything, that we've provided more than what actually be needed. And in doing that, provided plenty of extra capacity for occasional influxes of extra vehicular traffic. And again, that's just our position on the project and kind of our thinking and what we've offered as far as the 1.1-to-1 ratio. And then otherwise, like I said, I think we are okay with the comments that have been provided, and I think that we can just keep working on them between our traffic engineer and Mr. Dirk to get to a point where everyone's got a common ground understanding.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna ask our legal consultant here, Stephen Murphy, to walk us through the zoning pieces. If everyone's had a chance to look at environmental partners, a lot of the zoning issues, waivers are pretty benign. Some of them have now gone away, and different, like to hear from you at this time.
Sure, and I don't know if you want to just bring, do you have the cover sheet, because that has the zoning tabulation and the requested waivers on it. So the cover sheet has kind of the zoning kind of analysis as far as setbacks, that type of thing, and
But was that just revised in the new application?
Yes, I think the only, I think we're good on these.
yeah, but if you go over to the left side of the plan, that's the waivers, but if you go over to the other side, there's tabulation. Then we
There
can
we go.
talk about the way, yeah, it's kind of a little hard to see, it's small, but so we can just talk about it. So, as you know, this is in the extensive business district. Multifamily housing isn't typically a use that's allowed in the district. So a waiver is needed to allow the use. So that would be a waiver. The way your bylaw reads is in section 3.2.3 is that if so if you have multifamily dwellings that are non-conforming in the EB district, then you look at the dimensional requirements for the closest residential district where multifamily dwellings are allowed. I had talked to your planner, and he had said that would be R5. So in the zoning tabulation, that is what the applicant has done, right? I'm following this. So under section 3.2.2, I apologize, I said 0.3, there's the zoning tabulations for R5, and then those are set forth in that zoning tabulation of what would be required. So these are requirements, and it might be helpful if you do another draft of this on the cover sheet, if you could just reference that that's the section that you're applying, that it's R5, that would be helpful. So these are the provisions, and then they show what is proposed here on the right. And it shows the various waivers requested, which we can get into more detail. The one question I did have is on the vegetative cover, because I think you said
That's gotta go
that
away.
it's
That
gonna
was,
go away because there's no frontage.
right.
frontage
The zoning
here.
ordinance requires 65% of the front yard setback area to be vegetative cover. We have no front yard setback area, so we have no need to comply with vegetating it. Although, believe it or not, after we had changed the combine the two entrances into one entrance, if Whistle Stop was a front yard, we now are at 66% vegetative coverage. We actually would comply with that anyway, if you considered that our front yard.
Excellent.
But because there was no front yard, there's no waiver needed anyway.
Right. One other thing I'd note on your table is that maybe the notes with frontage, because at least on this version of it, or at least the version I'm looking at. which
Yeah,
I
there's
thought was-
the double
Yeah,
asterisk.
the double asterisk,
is old.
and then also a waiver is needed for frontage then, because there's no frontage on, so there's no yes there next to frontage. You know, if you go across and say waiver requested, like
Yeah, I
there,
can see
since
that.
there's zero frontage
that's gonna be
provided,
a-
that all just
Yeah.
needs to
That
be
should be-
updated. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's just some updating needing to
We
reflect
agree.
what you
Yeah.
presented. So I would suggest that. So if you go over to the other side where you walk through the waivers. So the first would be, I believe, is the use. And then we get into, it says 3.2.3, but I think it's 3.2.2, but maybe we can just talk and confirm that.
Multifamily 3.2.
Dimensional requirements for multifamily dwellings and their
Yeah.
accessories 3.2.2. So just some, like I said, these are minor cleanup type of things that, you know, we can confer if necessary to go through. So you have.
The arithmetic remains the same.
Yeah,
The citation
right, that's what I'm
incorrect.
saying. I don't think the outcome doesn't change. It's just a matter
Yeah,
of,
getting it right.
so that, you know, when the board gets to the point of making decisions, we just have kind of all the i's dotted. And then just reflecting the frontage, et cetera. So everything that we just talked about. But I think if I have the list correctly, you're talking about use, frontage, side yards, lot area, the open space, parking spaces, and then the driveway one, I think goes away now because you only have one drive, assuming you keep only one driveway,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So,
So there is a driveway one about the composition. The parking ordinance requires asphalt throughout, and obviously for drainage purposes, we're proposing that gravel turnarounds, that does
Right.
require a waiver.
the last one though is that all driveways shall be separated by at least 30 feet.
Oh, that was,
But does that go back to when you had two
Right, yeah,
driveways?
yeah.
So that went away.
Yeah, so I think it's just going back to these two tables on the cover page here. And, you know, updating them to match what you
Absolutely.
presented.
Sure.
And, but, you know, those are the waivers. They're requested. I haven't identified any additional that they might have just the oversight missed to reference. I don't believe Scott identified any additional ones either, but Scott, if I did miss something, you can tune in, but you don't have to if we didn't miss something. So, so that's where we are waivers. It's a fairly short list of waivers.
Yeah, he didn't state any others in his report.
Yeah, yeah.
The only other complication as we decide how 50 is being analyzed is that if 50 is being pulled into this, then we would need a waiver from section 5.8, which is site plan review. If 50 is being left as a condition, that 50 has to be retooled, then we would go to the planning board separately for site plan review after this. And so that's again a matter of the direction the board decides to take. So if 50 is pulled in and essentially permitted, if the changes on 50 are essentially permitted through this, then we need a waiver from section 5.8 to excuse it from site plan review.
Yeah, except to the extent that if it is brought in, then the zoning board would act as the site plan review authority, so it may be that it's
Oh, that
covered
qualifies
by,
it.
it might
We certainly have
qualify.
traffic engineers
Yeah.
looking at it, so that would be the,
Yeah, so we, you know, we can talk about that more if the board would like, but, so the waivers are pretty straightforward.
Agree. Yeah, some of them are pretty simple. Typical. We still got to talk about the parking, that's all. This is And we're still, so 2 and 7 will get a response on, and the fire department feedback, fire chief's feedback will help us there too. Anything else?
I had a list of things that I was keeping that maybe if it would be helpful
Sure.
if I go back over the list. And one thing I noted, I don't know, Suzanne was mentioning, there might be someone from the city there tomorrow as well.
Great.
Okay.
And maybe from
Maybe.
DPW or.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just so you know who's showing up.
Sure.
Okay.
You don't arrest them.
Well, the blue plates usually
Yeah.
tip us off.
There was a mention about some work that might have to be discussed with the MBTA. Was that work on the site or was that off-site work?
Offsite works. So basically the MBTA allows us, we would continue the sidewalk that we're planning to the edge of this property, kind of across the corner of their parking lot to connect with their sidewalk and their parking lot. And we have to deal with the MBTA anyway, because to build anything in this site, we have to get a sign off from them that they are not going to now or in the future decide to turn this back into a spar yard or something and
Okay,
take it away from us.
but that's an off-site extra perk,
Yes.
assuming, but it's not something that's actually affecting what's
Right,
on
the
your.
sidewalk is
Okay.
built regardless up to the line.
Yeah,
And then if we
okay.
go over the line, we will.
So how does the MBTA approval, where does that fall into place? After permitting?
When we go to apply for a building permit, I have to have a sign off from
The
the
MBTA,
MBTA.
any property that they used to own.
Yeah. And they we're in a recorded meeting, so just say, they have asked us to make sure this is gonna be a real thing before they dig into this.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, for the fire department, I had two potential questions if they want to weigh in. One was kind of their feeling about the access to the building, and the other one was the gravel turnaround. So those were two questions for the fire department.
Yeah, and I suspect that that the fire department will be able to provide a memo and attend your next meeting.
Okay,
and certainly if the fire department has any best practices relating to condition of gravel for their machines, we'll certainly, appreciate that data so we can incorporate it into the site plan.
okay. On, regardless of whether 50 gets pulled in or not, for the 20-foot utilities and over 50, is that all new utilities going in? So that would be excavation and everything would that?
I
Is
believe
that
there's some
required?
portions that are existing. There might be a gas line that's already servicing that
Yeah.
building, so it'd be continuation of that. The water and the sanitary sewer are coming from Maplewood, so those would be brand new.
So that would be excavation on
Yes.
50. Okay, so that just something to think about for conditions related to just construction management and disruption kind of thing. Okay.
And to the easement, just to make sure we get this also, is that because we've now moved into common ownership, obviously,
Oh,
we have
yeah.
an easement against ourselves.
Yep.
So the condition would have to word that if they were ever separated in
Right.
ownership, any separation would have to then go with the easements.
And so sewers and water's going out that way to Maplewood, but mentioned earlier, storm water's going
To Whistle Stop.
toward, down from the flood area toward Washington, Street,
Okay.
away from, that's good.
Yes, Washington Street, that's correct. Away from the-
All right, and then Scott had mentioned lighting and retaining wall, so I know you're already talking to him about that. Jeff's comments, we've already talked about, and I think the last question is, potentially the interaction with 50, I mean, right, what does 50 get pulled and not get pulled, and because I think they did describe kind of what the changes were gonna be, but neither Scott nor Jeff have been asked to look at that yet.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the list I had. I don't know if there was other things that the board wanted more information on for the next hearing.
Was the question of joining 50 to 50 there, one of the things that you're going to be talking to us about?
So the board did vote last week. The letter went out today. I think Allison may have forwarded it or is going to forward the letter.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, so you can,
Oh, I
there-
see.
yeah, it should be in your inbox.
Okay.
It was one of those things where we kind of, as the chair asked last week, we kind of left it open, like the board's just kind of reserving the right to determine whether or not it makes sense to combine them or not. So, we kind of left it open because that's how the board left it last week.
I don't see how we can't combine them where they're so intertwined.
If you just have us extend on both sides the analysis
Yeah,
further the property.
yeah.
So we would have to decide to do that officially. That's something we can discuss a little later tonight. Maybe. Do we have anything else, any other testimony now? Before I open public, because we are public hearing. And so I'm going to allow public testimony once again. And I I'd ask if anyone wanted to speak in favor of the project from the public, either on Zoom or in person. Please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll open up to anyone that wishes to speak in opposition to the application or questioning. I know we did receive some reports. Ms. Works, you wanted to have the floor, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Betsy Works, 46 and 48 Maplewood Avenue. I'm a trustee of the Works Realty Trust, whose property borders 3/4 of the east side of the 50R lot. I'm personally all for affordable housing. I've sat in the Affordable Housing Trust for 7 years, so that's not an issue for me. My primary and very serious concern here is about making sure this project will not have any negative impacts upon our properties and the businesses that have been there for the past 40 years, as well as negatively impacting the drainage and the watershed where these properties are located. Our family has owned this property since 1967, originally as a car dealership, which included the car wash building. In 1984, the area was redeveloped into a small mall, and convenience store 7-Eleven and McDonald's moved in. In 2003, the car wash building was sold to Mr. Alexandro with the contingency in the purchase and sale agreement that the entrances and exits would be shared as common use in consideration of the close proximity of these buildings, the pre-existing tightness of the vehicle corridors, and the circulation patterns and parking. It has been successfully used by these businesses there for the past 19 years before the sale. This was intentionally put in order for all the businesses' operations to run smoothly, which it does. Additionally, the deed in this sale records a covenant that says any building or other improvements constructed upon said premises, the car wash, shall be set back 50 feet from the public right of way. You had said that you had received a quitclaim deed, and I'm not sure if that was the quitclaim deed to 50 Maplewood or some other quitclaim deed that just came in recently.
It was conveying 50 rear to Bigelow LLC, which
Oh, okay.
just to get the name correct for the mass housing
I
application.
see. Okay, so I have a quitclaim deed right here that is part of that deed that is specifically says that about the improvements. And I would have brought more copies if I knew was going to bring it up. It's there and I can show it to you. I have an example of the 4-foot sidewalk and what that's going to do to change all those corridors there. My concern is also the corridors between the 7-Eleven building and the car wash, which have easements on them already as part of this purchase and sale. And I'm concerned about this utilities corridor that's going to go through, which is going to be more pavement. And that has to be coordinated with the pavement and the grading in our property. We've had McDonald's put up their property when they rebuilt that new building, and it had a slope graded into the 7-Eleven property. So now we've already in a bowl back there in the back of 7-Eleven. We don't want to create more of a bowl through that. So those are very big concerns that need to be addressed. And the two pieces, these two pieces need to be addressed in this process. I hear all of this stuff going on, but I hear nothing of a concern about the abutters property that is also has pictures of flooding that we've seen over and over and over again. And we'd like to have that be part of this process. Additionally, a wider and more realistic scope of these already existing restrictive parameters of the 50 Maplewood Car Wash need to be addressed by the applicant and consultants in this processing. The traffic flows did not take in these pre-existing private restrictions on the car wash property, and so we need a reality check. The traffic flows didn't take in what's happening at McDonald's during peak times called noon and dinner time. If you go down there, you'll see sometimes that traffic is backed right out onto Maplewood Avenue. That's why we've asked for a site visit. Again, we'd like to see that happen. And then Mr. Wheat bought the 50 Maplewood Car Wash lot in May 2018 and 50R in April 2020. I believe that's correct. The flooding and drainage of that area. Again, I've given you pictures to take a look at. This is what our experience has been down there. That's the reality check. The Winchester 2000 Winchester study that the city of Gloucester hired to investigate, identify, and document existing storm collection and drainage conditions which affect this specific area cites that it is a sub-catchment part of the 175-acre watershed in the north central area of the city. It states that, quote, development in these areas, key areas, is threatened regularly because of apparent failures within the watershed of its ability to collect and convey stormwater runoff, and in particular, these smaller individual runoff districts, which they are referred to as sub-catchment areas, as in Maplewood Avenue, have impervious materials that dominate the area, causing large amounts of runoff to be generated by even the most normal rainfall events. This report was done 23 years ago and specifically states, and I quote, the Maplewood Avenue commercial strip, 7-Eleven, Soft Touch Car Wash, and the Myrtle Square neighborhood are two areas within the city that sustain the most disruption due to the flooding during normal to moderate rainfall events, because these areas are the most problematic segments within the project watershed, and because they originated the need for this study and eventual improvements. More details on their existing conditions are provided. In your packet, I put some of the pages in there. Obviously, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I hope you do read it though, because not only does it talk about this subcatchment area that's failing to be able to take on all the new climate change stuff that's coming through, all the stormwater flow. It also talks about how development in the upper watershed is affecting downstream, and we're downstream in that watershed. So if you look at that, I gave you a bunch of different pages that really specify this area to look at. And I strongly recommend that everybody read them because it's a topic of concern, especially with the climate change and the severity of climate events that are happening.
The members will look at what you gave us in the future.
Yeah, it's
submitted tonight. So
the whole plan by itself is really good for everybody to be aware of, because they do a really, really good study of the entire area of the watershed. Also, the City of Gloucester Hazard Mitigation Plan 2020 update lists significant storms and flooding in cities and cites this area in the locally identified areas of inland and coastal flooding on page 38 of that 157-page document, and states that this is Area 21, the Great Harbor Swamp known for flooding. Its priority is low because they carried it forward from the 2012 plan. And they state the Great Harbor Swamp was filled to accommodate construction of the city center. Maplewood Avenue experiences inland flooding. The filling consists of unconsolidated material. There have been some recent drainage improvements since the last plan update. The CSOs have been eliminated in this area and additional drains added, which should divert some of the flows. This area will need to be cleaned and maintained going forward to prevent future flooding. And then there's the City of Gloucester Hazard Mitigation Plan. Section 5.5 of that zoning ordinance contains low land requirements that prohibit the issuance of building permits for principal buildings on land less than 10 feet elevation above the USGS datum, except on approval of the special permit for an exception by the City Council. These exceptions can be granted only if the applicant can prove that the development will not pose a hazard to health and safety. These requirements are in place because the following conditions are presumed to be hazardous. A floor level of any structure for human occupancy less than 12 feet elevation. And B, individual sewage disposal systems subject to inundation in the event of coastal flooding to 10 feet elevation. The group Town Green has been hosting a series on preserving the Good Harbor Beach ecosystem that includes this upper watershed of the watershed that we're talking about in this ecosystem. The city of Gloucester, as we know, is creating flood overlay zoning. There is action on our changing climate change events by all coastal towns at this point. It would be prudent to take all of this into account, especially in this area. I put pictures in the packet of the recent flooding storms and a few from the past. I have a lot more. The ones not dated are of the July 23rd, 2020 storm, where there was no power for the McDonald's pumps and the 10,000 gallons had to be pumped out of the back of the whole area that was flooded, with an estimate by the water extraction people of 120,000 to 200,000 gallons total. Luckily, the rain stopped and the water stopped at the front door of 7-Eleven and didn't go in the building. As far as the drainage, we've been working to resolve the ponding action on the lowland that is behind 7-Eleven, but we are in a bowl and all the storm water from all the property around us flows into it. That's a problem that needs to be addressed in this entire process of what we're doing here. It's got to be addressed. The mitigation plan also highly recommends that there be green site design to increase tree plantings near buildings, increase the percentage of trees used in parking areas and along public ways, promote green infrastructure and adopt net zero water use. We would like to see green site plans in this new area of development, especially where we have this incredible atypical water situation there. The other part that came to my attention was the contamination of the soil. I've included in your packet a 2004 report from HydroTerra Environmental Services done for J. McNiff for the 6.7 acre parcel of land building property behind 50R. They state that there are many contaminants in the landfill, like lead, ash, etc., and talk about activity use limitations, the AUL. 50R was a railroad spur that had a lot of activity, and the Rails to Trails program has identified many contaminants in the railway corridors, including coal ash and cinder containing lead and arsenic, and chemicals from railroad ties, such as creosote, that have chemicals that can leach into the soil. I've included a brief article in Rails to Trails that explains what due diligence they require in testing these railroad corridors and what they have found. And there are many more articles that you can find online about it. But will there be soil testing survey for the contaminants in this property? That's a real big concern. We don't want human beings living on contaminated soils. Construction plans and logistics. We're also concerned about the building permit phase process of the construction sequence planning. And we expect to see some drawings so as to not negatively impact the surrounding properties and the groundwater levels that must be maintained for the wooden pilings that these buildings are on. I thank you for your consideration of all these aspects, and we look forward to working in collaboration and cooperation to coexist together on these lots. I also request that I would like to be present during the site tomorrow because I have so many pictures of the flooding. I have so many videos of watching the water and how it comes down off these different properties into the back of that 7-Eleven property. So there's a lot of study and research we've already done to that with that. And we had hired a consultant years ago to help us try to get this problem resolved once and for all. But the railroad property put in, knowing that this was the part of the property that bowled behind 7-Eleven, that was the lowland, put in that pump specifically so that their property that had the overflow, stormwater overflow, would be drained through that pump. And that was the way they all cooperated in that area together. So we've been trying to get that pump going. And I know that we talked to Bill and we've talked to Joel about that, and we continue to want to talk to them about resolving that. But that was what the original result was. of how they were going to maintain and solve that problem.
Two questions. You mentioned legal right of way to 50 Maplewood over the property line. Is that true?
A legal right of way,
You said you had deeded right of way over
You're talking
off
about
your
the traffic
property
flow.
onto 50.
Yeah.
I believe the car wash building has to be 50 feet back from Maplewood Avenue.
no, the car was building, no. It just says any buildings or other improvements constructed upon said premises
50, not 50R.
No, I meant,
shall set back,
Oh, I-
shall set back 50 feet
that's what I'm sorry, I meant 50.
from the public
have-
right of way. Yes, that's on the 50.
So
That's
the
on
corridor on the
property.
left side of the car wash building, do you have legal access to that or right away?
We have an easement because there's vertical
Of easement
Pardon me?
for utility?
to get to the, no, to get to the back of the property.
To the back of
So,
7-Eleven.
Mr. Chair,
To get to the back
I
of
have a question
7-Eleven.
about that, because you did mention that the purchase and sale agreement required that there would be shared. But is there anything that was ever recorded that said that? Like if there was something that was recorded that said, you're referring to an easement. But if there was
Right.
something that was recorded that says that, could you provide that to the board?
Yes,
Because I think
I don't
that's
have-
what the chair is referring to, is you're saying the area between the two buildings, between the 7-Eleven and the car
Right.
wash, that the purchase and sale agreement said something about sharing that
Right, well, the exits and
area.
entrances, they had to be shared
Right.
and that easement.
Is there if there's something recorded
Okay,
by the
I'll look
registry
for
of
it.
deeds that talks about that,
Okay,
if you could provide that, that would be helpful.
okay.
I don't think we've seen any that yet, if that
Right.
exists.
Have you seen the deed for, quitclaim deed for
Your
Yes,
property?
for 50 Maplewood.
50 Maplewood?
Yes, that was looked at in connection with determining Whistle Stop Way. So I don't believe, the board may not have a copy of it, but.
Right, I
you-
can make a copy. I just brought one.
I was just gonna ask both this and anything you're referencing, could you possibly send it by a copy of this and that, send them all to Ms. Battle so she
Sure.
has them
Yeah.
for the record? Okay.
Yeah, my concerns here that, as we've been talking through all of this, I haven't heard our properties be be mentioned. It's sort of like, there's nobody over there, there's
Well,
nobody next to us, and it's
so-
concerning.
I mean, what I'm seeing is, the reason for that is if 50 rear, 50 now combined can prove through engineering agreed to by our consultant that they're not gonna discharge any water onto your property, why would we be considering what's going on your property? That's their burden of proof to show that they're not gonna make things worse. And I said that from the beginning, if they've got to show us that this is not gonna dump a bunch of water into, as you refer to, your bowl. And if they can successfully do that, then we have no, I don't know
Authority
what the word I
to
wanted,
order
yeah,
them
to
to
even
do
get into
anything on your
anything going on
property,
on your property.
Right, but if they if they had put a new utilities corridor through there,
On
that's
their
gonna be
property.
excavation on their property, right? Then they're going to have to do grading, right? They're gonna have to do pavement and grading, some kind of, that grading has become a problem if it's higher than what the grading of the pavement is now. That's a potential problem for us. The other part is we have parking on 7-Eleven, on the side of 7-Eleven's building, that's vertical parking. They're showing vertical parking on their side of the building. If you
On their
drive
property.
on their property, but if you drive through, we have to drive through on that line, right? On that property line, we share it. I have to drive through there to get to the back of 7-Eleven, right? And you can literally put, if you put cars on either one of those vertical parking spaces, you can literally put your hand out and touch the back of the car as you go by. There's like that much space between the back of the car and cars that have been using that back and forth as a corridor.
So people park along the right side of the 7-Eleven building too?
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yep,
And but they're unrelated.
they're unrelated. No, actually, a lot of the people that are going to the businesses over at 50.
Well, I'm sure people go anywhere they want.
Right, exactly.
But I'm
We're
just saying
sharing
with
that.
regard to the property line, the inflow traffic to the back of the car wash and to those 6 parking spaces is all on the 50's property. It's none of it is on the offer.
Well, I think that's why the realistic thing is to take a look at what we're talking about, because you can't, it looks great in that,
Well, that's an engineered drawing. so-
well, it's an engineered drawing, but there's no way that you're gonna get these cars that are gonna be vertically parked there and you're just gonna have one-way entrance. There's only one way, and the cars are using them to go in and out all the time from in that area. So my concern is if you're going to, claim that place in the middle as yours versus that we're sharing it, there's a problem there because we have to be able to get back and forth to the back of the property. right?
That's why we're looking to hear if there's some type of right of way. Sure.
Yeah,
Easement on that.
Right, okay,
Yeah, so I think that issue is pending at this point. I would say.
right, okay.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition at this time, either in person or on Zoom? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom. Pamela Steele. Allison, could you bring her in? Audio.
Hi, Pam Steele. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Pam Steele, 10 Pilots Hill. I had brought up the wetland at another meeting to you guys, and I was just wondering, is anyone going to speak tonight about that? The wetland that abuts the property.
Okay, it's been addressed a little bit with regard to the edge of the road. But as long as they're not putting runoff into the wetlands, again, it's not part of what we can look at. If there's
Conservation
no,
Commission.
yeah, Conservation Commission might, that's off the site again. And if this project is not dumping water into the wetland, which we're still up, we're still getting feedback on, then it wouldn't be a factor. Because it obviously is not running from back where the building is.
So no one's really looked into that then, is what you're saying.
Well, the applicant also has to go to the Conservation Commission, so conservation, because for just the portion of the property that abuts Whistle Stop Way. So there will be a hearing before Conservation Commission determining about the impact on the wetlands.
So it will be addressed at some point, is that correct?
I
Yes.
don't know.
Yeah,
By the con-
Yeah, the Conservation Commission.
Yeah,
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 conservation.
not by this board,
Yeah.
but by the Conservation. Commission.
The
Thank
applicant,
you, appreciate it.
we've represented all along to every board that we've been in front of that we will be going to Conservation Commission under a normal notice of intent process. We are in the buffer zone for wetland resource area. We have to demonstrate to their satisfaction that the work occurring in the buffer zone is not going to negatively impact the resource area offsite.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition at this time? There will be more public
Tracy.
hearings. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you, Tracy O'Neill, 12 French Street, Ward 2 Counselor. I know this area very well. I grew up on Myrtle Square. I'm 64 years old. We moved to Myrtle Square when I was 10. The house on the corner of Myrtle Square and Maplewood, behind it, it flooded, the basement flooded. That's 54 years ago. As a teenager, I worked at Work Chevrolet, and where the nail salon is was the showroom. Where the car wash is was the service area. Where the 7-Eleven is was the body shop. And when it rained, the guys in the body shop got in a dinghy and rode from the body shop to the service area for mug up. No lie, 3 or 4 guys, big guys, they didn't bottom out, they didn't touch bottom. That's how bad it was back then. I think it's only gotten worse. I don't live on Myrtle Square anymore, but that's okay. So I don't see how this, when I was a kid, Whistle Stop Way was a dirt footpath, and only if you knew it was there. Okay, that was all woods, all swamp. And now it's paved I don't know how that happened, but that's okay. It's just that we're taking up all this swamp area and all this wetlands, and we're not given any, I'm not saying we're not giving any thought to it, but it's a swamp. And by adding buildings and adding pavement, it's just gonna get worse. I don't see that this is good for the neighborhood. Regarding the traffic study, have they even thought of the summertime? Our population just about doubles in the summer, right? Regarding the parking, 1-to-1 ratio, zoning calls for 1.5 cars per unit. I think it should stay at 1.5 cars per unit. What else? And the soil. The soil, I used to play there as a kid, and it was drenched in, I think it was creosote or oil or whatever it was. Not a good thing. I don't know who said something about 5.5 of the zoning laws needing a special permit of the city council regarding floor levels of the first floor. Who said that?
I was referring to something I read, mitigation plan.
Okay, and I would have to look that up. I'm sorry, I don't know that, but I will definitely look that up. This is an environmental justice neighborhood, meaning we don't have a lot, okay? We don't have a lot of green space. We've lost a lot of green space. We don't have a lot of money. A lot of people in that environmental justice Ward 2 R5 neighborhood work 12 and 14 hours a day. They can't take the time. They don't even know this meeting is happening. That's why I'm here to fight for them, because we're losing green space left and right in my neighborhood, in my ward. And I am against this project. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak at this time? There will be more opportunities for public testimony as we develop along. Seeing none, I will allow, keep the public hearing open, but Joel, if you wanted to rebut anything said or clarify, you have an opportunity.
Sure, appreciate that. Kind of working backward, I just pulled up map geo. We are at elevation 45, so lowland provisions start at elevation 10. We are 35 feet above where the lowland provision would kick in. And as this being a 40B, it would just be a waiver through the zoning board anyway. This would not go to city council. We are again 35 feet above where the lowlands ordinance kicks in. And then again, to that degree, I don't think anyone here is disputing that the 7-Eleven parcel has drainage issues, that McDonald's parcel has big drainage issues that affect that shared space. Again, we're talking about a development on 50R, and as the chair pointed out, we have to show you that what we're doing on 50R is going to either take things as they are and keep them as they are, or make them better. And that's, it's not our obligation to solve 7-Eleven's drainage problems. It's not our obligation to solve McDonald's drainage problems. It's just make sure that what we are doing does not make anything worse and hopefully makes it better. And again, that is what it is our burden and we intend to show. The last thing I was mentioned is with all due respect to those speaking in opposition tonight, what was happening 50 years ago, what was happening 23 years ago when that 2000 study came out. I certainly remember in the early 2000s, if it rained, you just didn't go down Maplewood Avenue because you were not going to get to Myrtle Square past McDonald's. There was serious infrastructure upgrades that happened. That puddling situation is very different than it was then. So don't know that it's, this idea that's gotten worse or that stayed stagnant from, again, how it was 50 years ago or 23 years ago. What we're going to do tomorrow, to be precise, is go out to this actual site, 50R, dig test pits and show what is going on right now in this moment and use, standard accepted engineering practices to project what will be happening going forward to make sure, again, that what happens on this site either keeps things as they are or makes them better, but does not exacerbate them. And that's, what we intend to do. Again, I just, would ask the board to to remember that we are talking about a development on 50R. 50R is private property. 50R is not ecologically beneficial as its current condition. There are some scrub vegetation. Otherwise, there's pavement and scrap across that property. The plan we are showing you has a good mix of turf grass, shrubs, and trees. So from any sort of, again, ecological standpoint, green space standpoint, although it will remain private property and not property that the neighborhood isn't able to, access at will, it'll be ecologically, for the ecology of the neighborhood, a more beneficial use of the site than is being maintained currently. And I don't want to go too much deeper for now. That's just kind of the points I want to touch on tonight. And certainly we can, at the board's discussion, have this discussion further at future meetings.
Thank you.
Can you just, did you see the letter from Ryan Sutherland
Yes,
to return? In that, he talks about this pump, this, pumping facility and paved over manhole covers. It implies that there's a covenant that is the responsibility of that property. And that's non-functional, right?
sure. So as you would know, being a lawyer yourself, reasonable minds can disagree as to what the language of a document is. However, I can represent tonight that we are intending to work with Ms. Works and her attorney to formalize an agreement whereby if this goes forward, Bill is going to just basically assume, regardless of what the covenant says one way or the other, Bill's going to assume the responsibility for that catch basin and that pump going forward, provided, again, this is going way outside this permit, provided that in the future, additional runoff is not directed to it. So the amount of runoff it takes now, Bill is willing to undertake to maintain going forward. Again, his project is unlikely to send any more runoff to that. However, as was talked about by Mr. Turner, to the degree that right now runoff escapes that catch basin and makes its way onto 50R, that will no longer be possible. And so as a part of trying to just get this over the finish line, while Mr. Weed's gonna have the site open, is gonna be installing his drainage, we're gonna offer to Ms. Works going forward that we'll just take that catch basin over, take the pipe over, take responsibility for the pump
Right,
over.
because who else could do it? It's on your.
So the catch basin's on Ms. Works' property, the pump is on Mr. Weed's property, and yeah.
Okay.
And so we're just gonna, at this point, because that covenant, I think is, Ms. Works has her interpretation of it, we have our interpretation of it. But for the sake of, again, trying to be neighborly and move this thing forward, obviously we'll be in a much better position than anyone else out there, should this project go forward, to make the upgrades to that. My understanding is that Mr. Weeds had the pump examined, it's dead. So that's why that, as in the catch basin doesn't evacuate, and the catch basin, by sitting still, collects sediment, the catch basin fills with sediment. So then even the pump was working, which it's not, now the water's being blocked at the catch basin. And so Mr. Wheat, in part of, this project, is willing to just go out there and say, I don't care whose responsibility it's supposed to be all these years to take care of it. I'll fix it, and going forward, we'll make it a responsibility of Whistle Stop Apartments to just, and I have, and to Ms. Works' credit, we have not been able to connect with her attorney to work that out. So I understand her concerns tonight, because this is new information to her as she sits here.
We talked about. Are we going to address the any waivers now, or wait till it's updated with the new application?
Yeah, and I think as far as, well, what do you mean address them, like discuss them? Do you wanna?
No, I was just trying to keep it, the ball rolling, there's some stuff we could easily clean up, but I think waiting for the results of 2 and 7 and the revised application that we got today, so we can have a finer list of waivers. And then we'll have a better idea if there's anything still in dispute.
And when you say 2 and 7, are you referring to Mr.
Referring
Dirk's letter?
to,
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
so that was 2 and 7 was on the site plan later in his letter. He had a couple of comments that are about the traffic analysis. I think there might be 4 or 5 items in total in his letter.
Yeah.
2 on the site plan and 2 or 3 on the,
Yeah, one of them relates to conditions as they relate to.
oh yeah, conditions that he's recommending putting in there. Okay,
right, yeah,
okay.
tonight we were just but we were focusing on just the site plan and the
Yep.
traffic.
Yep. Okay. And I think having the fire department weigh in on
Yeah,
it's gonna be
definitely,
really
yeah.
important too.
We need
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure,
Yeah.
because I don't know where I heard it. I don't know if I read it in anywhere, but there's still the discussion of access behind the building.
Oh, you mean whether it's too close to this?
But I don't
Wouldn't that be
think it's
fire
gonna be, yeah, I don't think it's, but I still want to just have them weigh in. As well as the turning and all that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just one question. They're gonna be out there tomorrow digging holes and looking at the soil, and is that what they're gonna be doing?
the applicant's engineers are digging some test pits, and our consultant engineer is gonna be there to observe it, to come up with a determination amongst them of what the actual soil conditions are and whether the drainage plan needs to be modified.
If they find toxins, will there be a remediation on the site?
They're not gonna be testing.
They're not gonna be
They're gonna
testing,
dig test holes.
They're looking at
They're
water.
looking at soil quality.
Okay.
The level of the water table, things like that. This property transferred with, I imagine without a 21E or anything like that, it's not in our purview.
I ask, can I ask a few more questions? Or no?
Question, sure, yep.
So no one's gonna test for contaminants or toxins, no one?
So when Mr. Reed acquired the property, he did a phase 1 and a phase 2 21E, and it was satisfactory. He was able to get standard lending on it. And
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, I just have another question. You're going to build 30 units and what do you call them, multifamily? Are they 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom? I'm
It's
sorry. I don't know.
It's primarily 27 studio units and 3 3-bedroom units.
Three-bedroom.
Multifamily just means there's more than one unit in the building.
And as I've explained before, from an architectural standpoint, they are technically studios. However, the bedroom is a separate distinct room. So they look on a floor plan more like what you would consider a 1-bedroom than a studio. However, because there's no living, it's a kitchen that flows into the living bathroom area, and then there's a door in the bedroom. Architecturally, it's considered a studio. I think as far as mass housing is concerned, that's a studio. But this is not like a 1 room and a bathroom. This will feel like a 1-bedroom apartment.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Should we make a determination about joining so nobody can conform
Yeah.
with traffic analysis?
I think. Any discussion by the board on that aspect of
Any
combining the project?
ramifications for us in combining? I mean, I think it makes sense, like you were saying. I mean, we're constantly talking about.
Yeah.
About what's
Yeah,
happening.
they definitely impact each other, and it just extends, obviously, the work people have to do to analyze it and give us the feedback. Because again, none of us do this stuff, so
We don't.
we depend on our consultants and our legal
I don't.
advisors to get us the information in a format that we can understand, which has been great so far. I gotta say, we've hired good people.
Yeah.
And the reports have been easy to follow. But yeah, we need to discuss it. I'm just open for discussion now. I mean, if we're ready to move on that, that's fine. I want to hear what everybody thinks.
Any negatives to combining?
Well, I would say the one thing is that I don't know, it would be a question for Scott Turner and for Jeff, what additional submission information they would need. And I think it's been raised with the applicant that it may be preferable to do it, but you might want to ask. Ask Mr. Attorney Savaza as well, because it does seem like they're going to need the traffic study would have to be expanded to include the analysis of the circulation and the parking on that in order for Mr. Dirk to review it. And I'm not sure what additional information Mr. Turner might need to review it. So those are questions.
Go ahead.
So to that end, if the board makes a determination tonight that is their preference and a request that 50 be officially wrapped into this application, we can, if you can give us until Wednesday of next week, we can give you a response whether we want to, acquiesce and go forward as is, or whether we want to retool and, because like, again, another option is to just cut 50 out of this and say, okay, we're not gonna touch 50, leave 50 as the cluster it is, and it can just stay there, and we'll cut a driveway and off whistle stop for 50R and call it a day, right? And I don't think we want to do that, but depending on when we have to analyze what bringing 50 in an official capacity does. 50 has 4 units of housing on it already. As Ms. Works has detailed, 50 has a lot of overlapping restrictions and easements. So to bring 50 in, I just don't want it tonight off shooting from the hip, say that's fine, go ahead and do it. If that's the preference of the board, we will take that under advisement, and I can commit to you by Wednesday of next week.
We're gonna continue to next Thursday anyway.
But I'm saying if by Wednesday we say, go for it, then you can instruct your third-party reviewers to begin analyzing it formally. And if we say, hey, hold up, I think we're gonna go a different direction, then I would at least not waste anyone's time having your side further review 50.
Right, but I don't want to vote on it
Right.
tonight until we hear
Yeah.
from you for next week's meeting.
Okay,
We'll vote on that on the 23rd.
Okay,
I agree.
because if you don't add it, there's gonna be big concerns for us about having joint access.
Well, they may not
to
go
this
that
piece
way.
of property, right? So,
We may require they can't go that way.
right,
They may
that's
come
what I'm
in-
saying.
They may
and you
choose to
might-
come in the other side. They got a
Right.
lot of options. None of which would be, by bringing it together, benefits the city of Gloucester, because we're dealing with multiple pieces of this puzzle and fixing as much as can be fixed with this project, which it will fix a lot of things. But, yeah, so think that over. We'll push this out for next week. Any board members have anything else they want to discuss, or any of the consultants have things? they'd
No,
like
thank
to-
you all. for your
Mr. Chair, I
information.
do have something to discuss.
Sure.
I think this is a great project, Joel, with the studio concept. I do. And I think it's, with the commuter rail there, it's a much needed, and it will lower the rents for a lot of people, not just in the building, but this is a ripple effect. My concern is the fire trucks coming down that route, coming down the driveway. And there are 40Bs, big associations, not in Gloucester, that put fines on people who live in the building not to park in that fire lane. And the makeup of the land, that truck comes in, and the people at night, I agree with you that there's not gonna be a lot of cars, I agree. But the person that comes in at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, parking up against that wall, that's a concern, and I just want to broach that. I think that the studios concept is a tremendous one for Gloucester. I just want to throw it out there that that's a concern I have.
sure. So you're thinking along the lines of, much in the way we'd have a maintenance condition that the permeable pavement be maintained. You'd want to see in one of the agreements for the housing that there be consequence with teeth if residents are parking outside of the designated parking areas.
Yeah, because there's really no way to, otherwise for us to regulate that. You know, if we agree to go with a lesser number, it's still up in the air. And it does become the need, people are gonna park around that circle. And then that's a real problem.
So
And how do you, just something to be thinking about. Glad Rob brought it
condition
up.
striping.
Some way to make sure no one, or that they know that you don't park in that fire lane somehow, but again, it's gonna be permeable material, so it's not like we'll be driving all kinds of lines on it or anything. But there'll have to be some regulation, signage, something. Yeah, I don't know how you enforce it.
Well, some of these associations, they find the people in-house. And I just think that the people that live there, on the end units, let's say, they have a right to get that fire truck down and provide safety for these people. And I just think that the three, it's not, again, I agree wholeheartedly. You got a commuter rail there, less cars, studios. It's the people that come at 3 in the morning, yes, they don't know what the heck they're doing. It's a cold night. And they stick it there and then something hits and that's it. But I think it's what you talked about with the studios, I'm 100%. I think it's great.
Okay, understood, thank you.
Okay, one thing, I don't know if Allison, this would be something you could do for us, but print out at least the site plan, so every member could have one, because we are gonna still be zooming a little bit for another month or so. And we'd like to be able to have something easy to look at.
Joe, I think the
We'll,
applicant
we'll-
will
we'll-
get
we'll
you.
fix that table on the first page and then we'll go provide, we'll go do, like we would when you first file with, what's good to them.
Paper plan.
We want full copies, so everyone's full size, so we'll do the 7 full size.
Not this big, but
So 11 by
No,
17.
I'd like to see, because this you can follow the details better, but
We can submit 7 full size copies.
and really, I mean, I'm only this the site plan that's showing the everything is more interesting. We don't need the
The detail
sewer
page.
connection details,
Okay.
those things, because we're depending on the consultants.
Okay, so we'll submit 2 full-size complete plans per the regulation, and then we'll give you additional copies for the board on the meat and potatoes.
If I just get my hands on one, I can make copies at work. I have big plotters.
If the applicant's willing to send them to
Yeah,
you.
no, I know, but that's only 2, but I could take one when he gets
No,
there.
he's gonna do.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 full-size complete sets that pretty sure the ordinance requires it anyway.
Yep,
right.
And then I was gonna give you 7 full-size copies of the select plans that would be most
Yeah.
useful.
that'd be great.
And that way it'll come from me and it'll come after we've, dotted those i's and fixed those little technical
That
things.
So just
Would you
correct
wanna
that first
take this
page.
back or?
Probably be safe, yeah, so we get the
They don't get
circulation
mixed
as
up.
the.
Yeah, right. They don't get them on.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Has anybody given any thought to the traffic increase on Washington Street? I was sitting in traffic waiting for the train to go by, which took forever. And traffic was backed up from the train tracks on Washington to the intersection with Prospect. That's how many cars were waiting.
Well, the
So,
traffic study shows an insignificant, what, 1 or 2 trips more out onto Maplewood. It wouldn't be any greater going. Just as many people might go, going the other way is a longer commute. But yeah, people
If you were
go
leaving
longer.
town, you might go that way.
just,
I would
just,
never go there.
just
Yeah.
a thought,
People
I'm
were
sitting in
trained,
traffic.
If the train was in the station, you would, because you don't, and you're leaving town, you're gonna go out that way.
Well, the MBTA parking lot can hold like 200 cars, and
Right.
there's only 4 ever in it, every time I've gone by.
I know, it's so hard to find.
Well, the thing that people have messed up on this whole railroad driving the housing is that the railroad no longer serves the industrial base of the North Shore. Unless you're going to Boston. We used to have, Gloucester used to fill 2 or 3 carloads of guys that worked at GE and Win. Those jobs aren't there anymore. So none of those people go. You ride the train someday, it's the old industrial base cities that it goes through that no longer serve a purpose for that rail. We can't take freight by that rail anymore. Matter of fact, this property, I've unloaded freight cars there in my early career in the lumber business, because we used to still take lumber by freight, as did Gorton's, brought their flour in that way, and Americold brought in frozen fish that way. But you can't do that. This 50 has been high and dry my whole life. I understand the rest was flooded. I lived on Maplewood Ave too, and behind D.O. Frost and all those were ponds and floods and used to ice skate there. But the city's fixed an incredible amount of Maplewood runoff, starting up at Fuller, when they captured it all that came down to Linsky's and used to flood Burns Field, which it no longer does. And a lot's been fixed. We can't really think back to when Norse's lumber was there and the Work Chevrolet flooded. Well, obviously nothing's changed because it flooded when it was Work Chevrolet and it's flooding when it's a 7-Eleven. And I don't think we can blame 50R for that because 50R is high and dry. It's flat. I don't think it runs right now. I don't see much running off it. But anyway, the engineers will determine that for us. But
Right, we haven't got our complete
yeah.
stormwater management plan yet, so.
All right. Hearing nothing further, I will take a motion to continue this hearing to next Thursday, February 23rd.
Will it be Zoom?
It will be Zoom.
I move to continue 50R Maplewood Avenue to our hearing on February 23rd.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to continue. It is a light hearing. We only have two things going on that night, so we will have plenty of time to discuss this. I realize we won't have anything firm from the engineering, so the stormwater is going to push off, but we will expect some type of an answer from the applicant with regard to combining the sites and go from there. So we need a roll call vote on the continuum.
Am I correct in saying that all 7 members will be voting?
5.
Yes.
Mr. Nyman,
Yes.
Mr. Canavo,
Yes. School vacation.
Mr. July,
Yes.
Mr. Freaky.
Yes, we are continued. Thank you, everybody, for making the effort to get together in person. Take it
Do
easy.
you want to do a motion to adjourn?
Take it easy. Yeah. Probably just continue. Yeah, you're right. I don't have any more hearings. Motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
No way.
Go right ahead.
Yeah.
I am. Inundated, freeze up.
I know, it's right, that's right.
Oh, it's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't do house inspections. I only go when there's damage.
I have a meeting that ends at 8:30 tomorrow. I might, on my way back from that meeting, just swing through to see how it's going.
I gotta drive my neighbor.